and welcome to the Never Ending Experiment. This is Kim Anderson. This episode, I'm going to be talking about overpopulation. One of my favorite subjects to discuss. Unfortunately, it's not everybody's favorite subject, but I do think that it is extremely important. I have spent so much time researching and discussing it and wrestling with all the ideas behind it. And I think it's probably time now to just go over it as a whole. Now, overpopulation has become a bad word, unfortunately. Overpopulation is real. It's very hard to argue about this. I think that what it's come down to with why people don't like seeing overpopulation is because they perceive people in a very different way. Part of it has to do with self-fulfillment and the fact that most people are pretty preoccupied on fulfilling their own desires and not necessarily on the broader reality. I am happy to say that there are a lot of organizations that are working on the population issue. There's a lot of different overpopulation advocacy groups. A lot of them are very research-oriented. Others are very activism-oriented. Some of them work in other countries trying to expand contraception and reproductive health. Others analyze the reasons behind overpopulation, why it's become such a big issue, and of course, trying to find out why people are shutting it down and why people are refusing to listen. There's been this idea going around that overpopulation was debunked, which is crazy because it's not debunkable. All of the reasons why people are saying that it was debunked are things like predictions about what was supposed to happen. Mass starvation, for example, never happened. They certainly did happen. We've had lots of mass starvation and increasing starvation, and now instead of it being in the so-called third world, now it's in every country. And that's why we have the word food security that wasn't really a word that was often used, has now become another buzzword. Food security means people don't have enough to eat. I can't even count the number of times I've heard Canadians saying that they grew up without really being sure where their next meal was going to come from. And we're supposedly the first world. And that's people that are already older that grew up here. And now the situation is worse. I've been in the position too where I'm not sure where my next paycheck is going to come from. And, having to wait several days just to buy food. So it's not a good situation. So the idea that that was debunked is ridiculous because it's happening more than ever. It's happening in a really objective way with the food banks going empty and so on. This is something that's very real. The environment is, of course, deeply harmed by overpopulation. Just regular population. That's the thing about our lifestyles is we consume so much per capita than any other creature. We are a cultural animal, and with culture comes stuff, clothing, housing. We have the most elaborate housing of any animal. We have roads and we have vehicles. We have so many things, and all of those things need to come from somewhere. And for the most part, they come from the materials on the earth. And in order to get those materials, a huge amount of disruption usually happens when we start mining and digging and taking things. So our impact, just as a regular human, is quite high. But our impact now in larger numbers is beyond anything that has ever been seen. We know that the human population has been increasing for centuries. So why are we pretending that these numbers going up and up and up are suddenly not an issue? It's very magical thinking. And I think that, unfortunately, a large number of the world's population have been led astray into this magical thinking that we can just keep increasing numbers and not suffer. And the suffering is unbelievable. I mean, there was only a couple of weeks ago, some of these big high rises in Hong Kong caught fire. And it's just a matter of time before that kind of things becomes more and more and more common. We can't expect these massive high rises to be the solution for a high population. And those people that say, oh, you could fill up a very small area of the world if it was just people. But the thing is that it's not just people. It's like I said, it's all of the things that we consume. It's all of the things that we make, that's really causing the larger impact. Why would we have high rises at all if it was so easy for us to spread out and live on a decent amount of land individually? That's not happening. That's not the direction that things are going. So obviously that's not realistic. Now, I've argued so much about this issue, but I think for me to get involved in the overpopulation question has come at a great personal cost because it's unpopular, but I stopped caring about popularity when I was 11. So I'm not really going to be able to really focus on that, even though I need to in order to make money. The fact is that I would rather feel good about myself and know that I've been speaking the truth than just start, being full of crap just in order to satisfy people of lesser intelligence and lesser conscientiousness, just to satisfy their conformity, which I can't do. I mean, I guess because I have a conscience. I guess that's why I'm still focused on this issue, is because I really do believe it is our absolute number one problem. There's nothing that's worse that we're doing right now than having too many children. That's definitely how I see it. And the more that I've looked at this question, the more I believe this to be the case. And I'm not alone in that. I'm happy to say that there are a significant number of people. It's just unfortunately, again, given this massive population increase that we've seen, the people talking about overpopulation are still a relatively small number compared to the total. A big part of why people continue is going to sound a lot like what I was saying before in my last episode about colonialism. Patriarchy is a big part of it. Unfortunately, so is matriarchy. So in that sense, matriarchy isn't the solution for overpopulation, and neither is women's education. This has been something that's been touted now for several decades that's just been proven completely wrong. And I noticed that first of all. And a lot of the issues with overpopulation I noticed in my own life and what people were doing around me, which made me go, wait a second, when I'm listening to the overpopulation activists, they're saying that women's education is the answer and that women's empowerment is the answer to stop overpopulation, because they were making really simplistic and quite short-sighted conclusions based on statistical analysis that are actually completely outdated now. And we're seeing more and more demographic statistics showing up that are actually proving it wrong. So our demographics is changing collectively, and a big part of that is women. And as much as I want women to take over and to get more power, the fact is that that has not shown itself to be a solution to overpopulation at all. In fact, it's done the opposite. And a lot of women are very, very caught up in birth and motherhood and putting that at a higher level than anything else. And that's why I can't fully get behind matriarchy either, because I believe the most important thing we need to do is to stop having children. So I wouldn't be encouraging either matriarchy or patriarchy, because they're based on moms and dads and not on individual people, including people who don't have children. And even if we are making up a larger percentage of the population, if the population itself is still increasing more, that means that the people without children aren't really making as much of an impact as we think that they are. And that comes down to our misinterpretation of demographic statistics and looking too much at birth rates and not enough at total population and even total births. I mean, the fact is that year after year, those numbers of births can change dramatically. The births come from the same place they always have, which is a sperm and an egg. But the way that a lot of people in the media talk about population, you'd think they were talking about like a waterfall or something that's like not alive and not human. But if you start to understand how biology works, then you'll start to understand that all of the graphs that come out of our behavior are going to look like they do in nature, which is in waves. Waves, S curves, J curves, U curves, so on. They're all rounded. They're not straight lines. The scattered graphs that you often see in the media when they show a bunch of different countries and then they put a straight line through it, that's really unscientific and it's trying to prove a point that's not based on reality. It doesn't make sense to draw that straight line through a group of dots. That's not what's really going on. And when you start to look at it in the normal way that you would, like other data, you'll see that actually it is going in these wave lines and not in straight lines. So trying to apply a linear idea to human behavior is really bizarre. I mean, that's not a thing in biology. It doesn't make any sense. A lot of biological phenomena work through thresholds. So you might see this increase, it kind of looks linear, and then they will reach a threshold, and at that threshold, the line will change. That's what we should expect to see. That's what we expect to see in any other idea in nature. So why are we not understanding that that's what applies to us? It's a little bit strange. And unfortunately, the one line that does look pretty linear, that is pretty straightforward, is that population line. And that's going up and up and up and up and up. And you can look that up yourself if you want to see our total population line. It's not crashing. It's not coming down. It's not even close to coming down yet. Certain countries have come down, and the birth rates was coming down pretty significantly in the last part of the 20th century. And since the millennium, that's slowed down a lot. It's not plummeting anymore. That's a lie. And that's why I'm going to call my next book Birth Rate Lies. All of what I'm saying now is the stuff that I'm focused on in my research. The fact is that you don't need to have kids. And I don't really care about just how fulfilling your life is. If we're all going to be burning and like the world is going to war and we're going to have all these diseases, what I find so exhausting when you get into these discussions is like people will go on about who's happier, married people, unmarried people, who's happier, parents or non-parents. And maybe it's not about that. We all go through periods of happiness and sadness, and we all have a huge variety of lifestyles. The idea that you're going to somehow feel unfulfilled if you don't have children is ridiculous. I actually feel enormously relieved that I don't have children because I know how hard it is. And I see the people around me that have kids, and most of the people I know right now are unemployed or they're very underemployed. And the idea that they can handle having a kid is really sad. I mean, the parents I know are really struggling. They're not able to give their children a lot of the lifestyles that they themselves had when they were younger. A lot of people are much more underprivileged now. And again, that's from overpopulation. All of the things that they predicted in overpopulation are actually things that I'm seeing myself in my country around me directly with the people that I know. I don't even need to look at the demographics to know that it's true. I don't need to look at the demographics to know that I, as a disabled person, am at the bottom of society. And anything that happens now, I'm basically like the canary in the coal mine. I'm the one that has to deal with the bad things that happen before anybody else does. And anybody else that's in a disadvantaged position is in that same situation. So if you're a privileged person talking about how great it is and how much better the world is, you're just further emphasizing that you are the problem that's causing problems for other people because you have no idea how unequal your life is and you don't even care. Over the last 5 years, over the last 3 years, with 5 years ago was the pandemic. And since it's stopped, we had a massive increase in population in Canada. And everything that they said about overpopulation came true in Canada. Everything. There's been an increase in governmental control, which is exactly what happens with overpopulation. There's been an increase in corruption. There's been an increase in antisocial activities. There's been a huge decrease in employment and wages and money, like I said. I could never have imagined how many people my age and around my age would be struggling for money so much. And the more that I understand now about this AI takeover, and remember, a lot of the people promoting AI are also pronatalists who are promoting a higher birth rate as well. Even though they know that we will need UBI, we will need a basic income for everyone in order to survive the AI takeover. They're trying to push the AI takeover first before basic income, which is absolute insanity, right? People will die because of this. The people that are saying, well, we want to have more people so we can go to Mars. Well, get that ship to Mars going first before you start to create the new people that you think are going to stick around to make it that far. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's like this takeover effort that's happening right now is such a gong show. It's so disorganized and random. And they keep pushing forward these ideas, but I'm sure there's so many people pushing back that it's just going to be chaos. And they want overpopulation purely as consumers. They want this machine-controlled environment that they think is going to be so much smarter than regular people. And all your role will be as a human being is a consumer. To just eat whatever crappy food they send to you, to live in your tiny little bubble, and to live in a virtual reality. This is what they're trying to create. This is this weird hive mind human desecration that we're living through right now, and overpopulation is feeding it. If you don't want disasters in the future, then stop having children and stop pretending that your children are going to be special or smarter. It's really, really urgently needed that people understand. And I think the celebrity classes have played a big role in causing this harm. They are so conservative. I mean, so many of these public figures are really, really pushing a conservative agenda, even if they're calling it liberal. If you think the point of life is to get married and have children, you're supporting a conservative lifestyle. So a lot of people that practice that will call themselves liberal and maybe have liberal ideas for other people, but they're still promoting the conservative lifestyle in their own lives. And maybe it's because I was kind of cynical about my own family growing up. I never liked the nuclear family. I've always been focused on extended family. And unfortunately, I have a long list of problems with overpopulation activists and how they talk about things because they're getting a lot of things wrong. I think family planning is wrong. I think pro-choice is wrong. The reason I think that they're wrong is because it's all about ego and it's all about control. Even how we call birth control, and it's the idea that like you're just going to choose when you have a kid and when you're not going to have a kid. But the fact is that life isn't like that. A life form that comes into creation has its own impetus for existence that isn't really up to you. You don't get to choose which of your ovaries pops out every month. You don't get to choose which sperm are created in a given moment. You don't know which one of them is going to be the strongest that's going to allow for the healthiest child. And if you want the healthiest child, which is what a good person would want for their child, then you would have to leave it up to life. You would have to leave it up to them. So you wouldn't be able to control when you have this perfect pregnancy. So a lot of the contraception is about not getting pregnant. It's not about getting pregnant when you want. you're just treating this child that doesn't exist like it doesn't really matter, which is like, well, then why are you having it if you don't care about the well being of the child? The amount of narcissism and selfishness that I've seen with parents is unbelievable. And unfortunately, a lot of the women that are getting on board with like single mother IVF or surrogacy are really, really harming other women, and they're really harming children. That is female patriarchy. That's what we're seeing a rise in. It's not feminism, it's certainly not matriarchy. It is female patriarchy. And we know it's patriarchy because what patriarchy is when you take the father, who is the least important of the two parents, and you put him first. So a woman who uses a surrogate, the surrogate is the more important of the two mothers, and yet she will put herself first, just as a man puts himself above his wife, who has done all of the physical labor of having a child and giving birth, and then goes on to actually name the child after himself, which is all some kind of mental illness that we have all gotten sucked into. And unfortunately, most of the women today are making it worse because they're practicing patriarchy, whether by becoming the female patriarch herself or by following the patriarchal mode. So the number of women that are actually pushing for a feminist agenda or a matriarchal agenda is really small. And like I said, even matriarchy is not the solution for overpopulation either. The good thing about matriarchy is that it will allow for more contraception and more intelligence in reproductive health. But that's not the kind of matriarchy that's being practiced today by the people that say that they want it practiced. They're not looking at knowledge. They're not looking at the generations of intelligence that was accumulated during matriarchal times. You can't just recreate that in a few years. So I haven't even touched on religion really, and yet we still have so many problems. And a lot of them are coming about from the so-called left wing, which has completely destroyed any truth or intelligence that it may have once had. I've been fighting against overpopulation for at least 10 years. And before that, I was just lulled into complacency because I didn't know that many people my age that were having kids, so in my 20s and 30s. And it wasn't until mid-late 30s that I started to fully understand that I was wrong and that people were just waiting longer to have kids, but they were still having them. In fact, they seem to be having more of them, and people are still having kids now. And it's tragic because we already know that it's a terrible risk to have children at a late age. We know that it's a terrible risk to have IVF. We know that it's a terrible risk to use surrogacy. And unfortunately, what we're also seeing is this deterioration of human intelligence. We're going to see a massive increase in disabilities, a massive increase in mental illness, all kinds of infertility issues. And I think that what's happening now with all of this infertility drugs and interference is going to push the infertility into the next generation so that the future birth drop will be far greater than it would be now if people stop trying having children. It's one thing to get pregnant, and it's another thing to try to get pregnant. And if you're trying to get pregnant, then you're really, really, really off track. And this is why I don't get behind this idea that you should just have as many children as you want. Because what people want and what we all need are two different things. It's hard to convince people of things that should be physically obvious to them. It's sort of like pollution. Not everybody is equally influenced by pollution. You can usually see it in the air, though. But there's some people that will just see it. They might even be coughing, and they will still deny that it's happening. They will still say it's not a big deal. And that's an unfortunate thing about humanity, is that we have the capacity to completely ignore really big problems that are staring us in the face. The other complication is that we are so complex, that the world is so complex. So we're in a situation now where so many things are going on in the world, and we are disconnecting causes from consequences. And when you look at demographics, that's a big problem with demographics, is that there's easy to find correlations between two different things. It's not always that easy to understand why. sometimes those correlations are due to something quite obscure, and yet we'll kind of go out of our way to make up this story about why it's happening. And it's not always true. You need to look at the bigger picture in a bunch of different ways and do a bunch of different tests, asking a bunch of different things. If you find any research that's showing an idea, you have to continue to look at that idea until you figured out for sure or not if it's true. And when it comes to women's education being the solution for overpopulation, we can say categorically that that was wrong, that that is not the solution, and that women's education does not lead to a lower birth rate. If anything, it is now showing that it's actually leading to an increasing birth rate. And that's because women with a high education often get a higher income, and they use that income to have children because women have not been convinced that overpopulation is real. And that's the problem. The only question that we need to look at and the only type of education that we need in order to stop overpopulation is overpopulation education itself. And I think that should be taught to young people. I think that should be taught to teenagers. I think that it needs to be understood in a biological way, which is easy to show. Just like global warming is easy to show. I mean, you can show people easily what global warming is in a clinical environment. I did it in junior high. I don't know why not everybody else did these experiments, but that's just how it goes. Not everybody's paying attention in school. Not everybody is doing the same projects. But these are pretty simple concepts, and overpopulation in a local area is always quite easy to see. All you have to do is take 2 equal containers. You fill one of them with a whole bunch of seeds and fill the other one with just 1 or 2 seeds. And just watch what happens. Watch what happens after a while. Is the one with all those seeds, they're going to die off first. They're going to die off because there's too many of them and they use up all the nutrients really fast and they're not able to live a long life. And that's the same thing with human beings. You can try this experiment with any organism that you want. And if you have too much of one kind of organism and environment, in nature, what usually happens is that the predators or the parasites of that animal will increase exponentially as well. And with human beings, because we learned to make guns and knives, we killed off a lot of those big predators, or we were able to push them back. Now a lot of them are more afraid of us than we are of them. So that is how we have screwed it up, is this stuff that we've made in our technology is actually a much bigger impediment to our survival than it is a help. And unfortunately, the techno-utopian religion, which is what it's become, is such that people will deny the problems that that technology and that consumption is causing and only focus on the positive potential solutions, even while that same technology is actually increasing the number of problems. So we won't be able to solve them all because we're still in a situation where we haven't figured out how to prevent those problems in the first place. And prevention is number one. And the biggest way to prevent any large-scale problems that is going to influence human beings is to just stop making so many. You know, it really is about how many. One and done or none. That makes sense, you know. But unfortunately, as soon as you start poking at that, all of this intergenerational trauma, all of your relationship with your parents and your grandparents and your ethnicity and your race and your culture and blah, 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 all comes to the surface. And people get really, really emotional and really, really personal about it. But one of the best pieces of advice that I heard of an overpopulation activist from Africa is just stop getting so emotional about it. This is a scientific question, okay? But our survival is at stake, you know? You could make an argument for either 1 or 2 kids. You cannot make an argument for more than 2 kids. This will cause large-term damage. The other thing is total fertility rate. This is also a nonsense idea that I debunk in my book. It has to do with women, and it is a prediction, and it is a hypothetical number that has no basis in reality. It really has no basis. It's not even the average number of children that a woman has. I mean, it's completely ridiculous how they come up with that number. It doesn't follow reality. It should never be used. The crude birth rate is the real number of births divided by the total population over the course of a year. That's a different thing, right? That shows an actual birth rate. The total fertility rate is a lie, and we shouldn't be taking that seriously, and we certainly shouldn't be talking about it publicly with anyone who's not a hyper specialist in demographic statistics. So we're in an insane position. Even the people that are talking about overpopulation are getting so many facts wrong. The denial of overpopulation itself is out of control. The greenwashing going on, pretending things are environmentally friendly when they're not going to be, so long as the population keeps increasing. When the technology makes things easier, unfortunately, people do not use the technology less when that happens, they use it more. So it doesn't matter if we create more efficient technology or more convenient things, just like AI isn't going to make the workforce easier. I care about the survival of life on the planet, and I don't care about people's personal foibles about their own DNA lineage, which, if we don't stop being stupid about it, there's not going to be any future for your lineage, and there's nothing for you to care about. There's so many people that have gone out of their way to have kids, and then they don't have any grandchildren or great grandchildren. Like, so many lineages just go extinct. That's just how it is. And if you have used IVF or surrogacy, you've pretty much ensured that you're not going to have any long lineages into the future either. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the extinction of half the world's organisms is a really big deal. And the more that you have children, the more that you are leading to that extinction. As far as I'm concerned, these are just basic facts. They may not be to your liking, but like I said, like, use your brain. That's why we're human. We're supposed to have a brain that functions. And it's not just about how you feel. I'm getting really fed up with the psychological manipulation happening. There's too many people that have overcorrected from a materialistic perspective where we ignored emotions or we tried to explain them away or shove them down, to this opposite extreme now where people don't seem to even acknowledge that physical reality exists, and they're just so caught up in their feelings that they're making completely irrational and sometimes even really abusive and harmful decisions because that's just how they feel. We have to be able to balance our feelings and our thoughts, our intellect and our compassion. And if you have compassion for humanity or for other species, then sometimes you have to put your desires second for the benefit of everyone. And that's the case when it comes to having kids. So accept infertility if you have it. It's a gift. It's a gift that may save you. And if you fight against it, you're harming your future children. Like, you're really harming them if you're using any of this technology or any of these fertility drugs to try to have kids. They're really unhealthy. It's a really bad idea. I wish I didn't have to fight this fight so much because it is depressing. But I'd rather fight the good fight than just give up. And until people start really letting that birth rate drop, like really drop, I mean, it's got to be down to 0.3. And we're still at 2.2, I believe, right now. So we've got a long way to go down before we'll ever get anywhere close to a sustainable population, let alone underpopulation, which is centuries or millennia away at the rate we're going. Unless we all go extinct all at once, in which case there's no choice for anyone. So if you don't want that to happen, then stop focusing on having kids. Also, talking about kids all the time makes you really dumb. And this is something quite sad that I've seen. It really does. Like, the more children you have in a household, the more the adults will start to act like children. It's quite a frightening thing to happen. But I've watched it, and it's really sketchy. So if we want human intelligence to increase and expand into the future, be an adult, really be an adult. And adults do not cry about not having kids. They don't. That's a kid thing to do. So grow up. I didn't even go into most of the details about overpopulation because there's just so much to talk about. And at the rate I'm going now, I have at least 2 books coming out that are going to deal with the subject, and maybe even another one after that. Maybe I'll keep writing about it. Probably keep writing about it until I see the global population actually go down. Until that time, I will be focused on this issue because, other than the economy and perhaps shutting down patriarchy and shutting down religion, I'm not sure that there are any more important subjects to talk about in order to help humanity. So, thank you for your time. This has been Kim Anderson on the Neverending Experiment, and I will be back again in a couple weeks. Happy New Year!